Good morning again, everybody. It's Trevor here from Port Shepstone. We're talking about Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. We've been talking in the last couple of days about what God heals, the body, the soul, He revives the spirit. And yesterday we talked about the fact that God is able to heal our land. Well, today I'd like to move on in this theme and talk about how does He do it? How does God heal? We all know that healing is in many ways a supernatural act, but I want to talk about how He heals, what is required for healing to take place, if it's to take place at all. But before we get into that, I want to throw a common sense thing at you for you to think about today. I want to suggest to you that your healing that you so desire may well be in your own hands. You see, there are people who are sick because they think bad thoughts. There are people who are sick because they have awful habits that they get into. And when we get into habits, whether they be in our mind or be in our physical activities, they can have a huge impact on our health. And so sometimes when we fall into this kind of illness, an illness of mind or an illness that comes from a bad habit, we run to God and we say, God, if it's okay, I'd like to carry on the habit, but I want your healing at the same time. And God's saying, that's not going to happen, pal. You need to clean up your act. You need to get out of the sinful thinking or the sinful habit, and your healing is in your own hands. The Bible has a great word that it uses. It talks about footholds, and it talks about strongholds of the mind. And sometimes with this fact that Satan, our enemy, is able to put thoughts into our minds, and those thoughts take root in our minds, and we find that it's got a foothold in our thinking. And then if we don't do anything about it, that foothold can so easily become a stronghold of thinking. And that thinking, that way we process things, our response to things around us, can have an enormous effect on us physically as well. When we change the way we think, we can change actually the healing of our bodies. The healing is in your own hand. Now, there are some great resources and some wonderful speakers who are out there. Henry Wright is one of them. If you want to read some of his great stuff on how healing is in your own hands, then for goodness sake, research it. Get on that Google thing and go and find out how thinking can affect the way that you feel. Also, some of the habits. Some of us, I think, some drink too much, smoke too much, all those kind of things. Some of us don't forgive very well. And all of these things can lead to anger and bitterness, and they all take a physical toll. So before we get into some of the faith models of healing, let's do the common sense model and check out our lives to make sure that we are okay with those things. I have a biblical example for you. We have the story of Job, this great man who was righteous in all his ways according to God, who was blessed of God, who had the presence of God surrounding him, encouraging him. But he recognized at the end of all the trauma that he had been through, he recognized in chapter 42 that he needed to repent. You see, he'd become proud. He said, he'd become kind of a little bit arrogant, and he had to have this shown to him by God, and God showed him his pride and his arrogance, and Job did the right thing. He repented of it, and he restored his relationship with his friends. Now, those friends were not friends, really. They gave him bad advice. They were poor counselors, and he knew that. But he'd built up a resentment towards them. He'd built up an unforgiving spirit towards those who had called themselves his friends. And it says this, that when he forgave his friends, his restoration became effective. When he forgave his friends, he received the healing of his body, his spirit, everything was healed at that particular point. We need to ask ourselves the question. Let's talk about footholds. Let's talk about strongholds in our minds and in the habits that we have. And let's get aggressive. Let's get angry with sin in our lives, because it will affect you physically. So before you go running off to some faith healer or ask God for some faith aspect of healing, clean up our own acts. Let's make sure that there is no unconfessed sin in our lives. And let's ask God to be able to relieve us of our pride. And simply by doing that, maybe we too, like Job, will receive the healing of our soul and of our body which we so desperately require. Your healing today, people, may just be in your own hands. I want you to think about that, and we'll talk some more tomorrow. Bye, guys.